Hello, hibiscuses. So by the time you watch this video, Jupiter, which is a planet that symbolizes ethics, law, finances, government, and most importantly, knowledge and information, and maybe we can chuck in technology too, is going to be going through the Gemini nakshatras. So it begins with Gemini type 1 to 2, Mrigasira. Now, Mrigasira is the hunt. This talks about a time where all of a sudden you are curious. You are not believing everything surface level. You're wondering, well, why are these our only options? How come that works the way it does? Is there anything more? There starts to be sparks of curiosity that are meant to lead you somewhere much better than you are currently residing. Then, on that path to seeking out the truth or different kinds of knowledge and information that weren't so readily available to you, we arrive at Ardra. Now, Ardra is Gemini type 3 to 6, and it deals with destruction. So this is usually quite an intense period where we realize how we've been lied to, how maybe knowledge, law, finances, different kinds of information have been weaponized against us to either keep us in the dark, to perhaps make us complicit or normalize things that are generally quite harmful. But likewise, it's symbolized by a tear. It talks about the revelations and clarities that we can only get post very distressing emotional events. But it's also a sign of transformation. So this is all the confirmation, validation, I don't know, whatever you need to cement that you have to make other stuff available and do stuff differently. And then this leads us to Purnavasu. Now, Purnavasu is Gemini type 7 to 9. Purnavasu symbolizes the return of light, the return of truth, and it's a sign that is equally associated to journalism, education, law, order. So there is a reason you are feeling curious about the things that you are. There is a reason you are pushing back or not so easily accepting what you once have done. And likewise, do not get disheartened, because all this discomfort is going to lead you to cultivate really cool truths that are going to be incredibly helpful in the coming years of dismantling colonialism and oppression. So you know the routine. Grab a cup of cha, get comfortable. Let's have a candid cosmic chit chat about what you can expect when Jupiter makes its way through the Gemini nakshatras. Let's go, hibiscuses. So let's begin by looking at my first set of predictions, which heavily focus on technological advancements. Now, full disclosure, as brilliant as technological advancements are, I do think there's going to be a much more intense themes that follows these breakthroughs. Because again, astrologically, we are now in the era of fascism and dismantling oppression and obviously the downfall of colonialism. So I do think there is this really strong theme of us taking social responsibility about these advancements. So for instance, who do these advancements actually benefit? Who gets to use them? Likewise, how are they used? What is their purpose in use? Because I can easily see in hindsight, because I wrote these predictions like months ago in 2024, that this stuff could easily be weaponized to perpetuate a lot of fascism and oppression against marginalized people. So yeah, just because we can advance something doesn't mean it's always right, and we have to figure out ways to be united about making sure these advancements are not, again, used against us or in the long term create more harm than they do good. You know, real girly pop delightful stuff, as always. So the first prediction I had focused heavily on advancements in biotechnology. So just to keep that really simple, all biotechnology means is it's a type of science that's used to advance the safety of human lives and improve the environment. So again, we have quality life and environments that are always flourishing. So for instance, let's start with medical biotechnology. That's where you get a lot of gene therapy. That's also where you can get like COVID vaccines. So if you ever find yourself in a position where unfortunately you've become more vulnerable than you ever expected to be, or you know, some people don't start life on the easiest of notes, there are tools and resources that can improve your quality of life, right? Get you to a point of safety and health. Number two, you also see it in environmentalism and agriculture. So for instance, right, As you know, I come from farming people, but farming is very intensive, and with a lot of environmental disasters, it's becoming increasingly hard to keep crops in a good position. So when you see biotechnology in this realm, it's just about making sure the crops, the land can receive the help that keeps them strong to a certain extent, no matter what the weather. And then again, we can see this in industrial biotechnology too. So it works two ways. It can be used to create fuels that again might be safer to the environment. And again, we will loop back to ethical stuff. And then likewise, it's the same technology that's used to kind of clean up any oil spills. So that's biotechnology, just so on the same page. Now let's get into the nitty gritty ethics of it all. So let's start breaking down the pros and cons about biotechnology, and likewise some of the conversations we could see that play out during Jupiter being in Gemini. So number one, undoubtedly, it saves human lives. Think about how different vaccines and different kinds of medicines have saved people, right? Because the truth is, we don't ever envision ourselves being in a position as vulnerable as we are when we are deeply ill. It's often unexpected, and sometimes it can feel like a death sentence. Thanks to biotechnology, we give people a fighting chance. And likewise, some people are not starting life off in perhaps the most safest and healthiest ways. They have a right to life. And again, biotechnology can help work miracles. So in that regard, who wouldn't be happy with advancements in this area? But with that comes my first critique. So as you know, I used to be a global D&I consultant, and I used to work heavily actually within the pharmaceutical industry and different kinds of medical fields. And my first critique always has been access, right? We saw in real time, think about COVID, right? The global south was actually producing a lot of the vaccines. However, the global south had some of the highest numbers when it came to COVID deaths. So they were producing medicines that own people could not have. But meanwhile, the West was safe. But even then, the West wasn't fully safe because as we saw, due to wealth inequalities, class discrimination, there were certain people who were able to have vaccines and access to that medication much quicker and easier than the everyday working class person. So again, in the era of fighting fascism and dismantling oppression, we have to ask ourselves, or should I say, we have to rally, fight, and protest for the abilities for these medicines to be fair, equal, and accessible for everybody. Because otherwise, I think one of the issues we face with these advancements is actually promoting eugenics. I think in some ways manufacturing the deaths of people that deserve to live. I think you can see quite easily how this could turn nasty. So again, when it comes to advancements, do you know what? This probably sounds a bit silly, but I would even say it's been really interesting to see how Ozempic and Mounjaro have been thriving on the lead up to this transit. Because in real time, I think it's interesting. A medicine that was designed for people who genuinely have like really serious medical conditions, and unfortunately, like their weight is so severely impacted. That's life-saving medicine. It can help them with depression. It can allow them to feel comfortable to mingle with society. You can see like the goodness in that, right? For people who've suffered for years. But then to see celebrities who already have like so many privileges, they fulfill so many standards, literally pick up life-saving medicine just for an aesthetic. I have a lot of ethical questions and observations. And I also think this is where regulation is really important. Because again, one of the awful things about colonialism, capitalism, and fascism is essentially the monetization of healthcare. And I think it says leaps and bounds that we're meant to live in societies that are progressive, fair, and full of opportunity. But yet we can literally see people die because we price them out of medicine. So again, food for thought. And maybe following on from that, whilst it saves lives, it also reduces suffering. So this is more aimed at the agriculture of it all. So as you know, I come from a farming family. I've seen in real time how biotechnology can literally help people keep their crops safe from so many uncontrollables, right? And that's amazing. However, sometimes I have other observations. So number one, I don't think the advancements of biotechnology is a reason to continually neglect looking after the environment, because a lot of the farming crises that many farming communities across the world face is unfortunately due to oppressive governments, greedy governments, exasperating environmental disasters, not caring for the land, making it harder to grow food. So again, I think we also have to look at, is there any chance that these technological advancements are scapegoats, or in some ways normalizing harm, exploitation, and destruction that we actually need to be getting in front of and taking control of instead of normalizing it, right? And then the third point I had, well, was actually around environmental protection. So the thing is, when you look at biotechnology, its three biggest things are saving human lives, reducing suffering in all kinds of ways, and again, protecting the environment. But I feel like in real time, that just hasn't been the case. And whilst there are really glorious examples of it being used well, I kind of think it's used as a cushion to say like, oh, well, what we're doing is not that bad because we can clean up our mess. But I'm like, well, how much mess can you clean up until you've destroyed something in its totality and there's nothing left to clean up, because now destruction is just the norm? So that's what I'm saying. Whilst you're going to see advancements, I am anticipating like a lot of ethical pushbacks, right? I don't think they're going to be announced and accepted as gloriously as I think some of the creators are thinking. And I think also, this is a bit trippy of me. I think when I look at some elements of biotechnology, I worry that we're playing God, right? And this is not about saving human lives, because 100% like medicine exists for a reason, use it, help people. I think there's a clear difference between people who actually need help and that assistance versus you pick up a certain medicine or technology to give you exactly what you want. And it seems very unkind and unfair that you could get exactly what you want whilst the rest of the world suffers. And likewise, I think a lot, there's been really interesting observations in the era of fascism and people being kind of fed propaganda about creating nuclear families. And, you know, I think in many ways, demonizing marginalized dynamics around family and just all of that. You can create designer babies, or essentially, like, as a rich woman with a lot of privileges, or a rich person has privileges, you can so easily have family health, all of that. And meanwhile, people in the everyday can't. Like, I just think there are deeper undertones, and I would expect, and I also would encourage you to deeply think, is this actually the right thing? Or is there any chance somehow, some way in the future, these advancements could really sour, and we might find that they were just normalizing their weirdness? Because again, we are in for historical times for a few decades, and in these like 5-7 years, the stuff that they create is going to have a nastier impact than however they launch it to us. And with that, let's look at my other predictions for technological advancements. As you can probably tell, this is going to be quite a big time for industries such as AI, space technology, the gaming industry, all that kind of jazz. And yes, whilst I expect we will have some really cool creations be launched and perhaps used by the mainstream public, I just have this underlying feeling it's not going to age very well. Because one thing I was thinking about is previously, under similar astrological transits, we had the launch of like iPhones and all of this stuff. And I'm like, well, now we've come 360 and it's returned to its starting place. In the same amount of years, we've actually learned how unethical like Apple is. We've learned about how these products are created and it literally destroys places like Congo and enables like child labor, human slavery. And it's just so bizarre to me. Like, I think one thing that's really hitting me, especially since Saturn entered like the 9 types of Pisces, which will be the next video, there's a lot that we have access to that we shouldn't. And it's really weird to me. We've normalized us having certain comforts, luxuries and privileges. And we don't care that they're literally created by exploiting, harming and killing other people. Like that makes me wildly uncomfortable. And I've been having loads of deeper thoughts like that. And even then, when you see the predictions to the left of me, right? I even created a series where I was talking about, look, using AI for spiritual guidance is going to go so badly and it's going to create a lot of damage, especially when it comes to people doing like insane shit that will end up in the news. I'll create a YouTube series about that too. But this is what I mean. Like, whilst I anticipate all these cool technological advancements, I just have this really nasty feeling that their creation is actually much more destructive. And I'm also concerned about how some of these pieces of technology could be weaponized to spy on people, monitor people, like in real time. Again, in the era of fascism, think about how many people have been sent to jail, imprisoned, and again, are facing legal action for freedom of speech and their right to protesting. And they've been tracked through their social media. They've been tracked through their thrones. That's why on TikTok, I keep reposting loads of people who are essentially consultants in cybersecurity. Because I think, again, we have to get smarter in our protesting and we have to become more savvier. So yeah, I see loads of advancements, but I have a lot of uncomfortable observations about the damage these would create. And saying that, let's look at my next set of predictions. Now, leading on from my concerns about the corruption and perhaps even harm that technological advancements are going to bring, the second set of predictions I had really focused on justice. Just because for me, when I think of Jupiter going through Gemini, I just really mull over this idea about how information and knowledge can either be weaponized and again harm people, or likewise they can be great tools of liberation and making people feel comfortable, validated, informed and prepared on how to make sure they are being treated fairly and society is not exploiting them or harming them. So let's get down to business. So the first prediction I had was this idea that new political parties would be established. So again, I think this is a global sentiment. We are seeing fascism pop up in so many different countries, different communities, different flavors, but the ideologies and the blueprint and the tactics remain the same. And I think one thing that's becoming increasingly undeniable is two-party systems do not work, because a lot of us feel like when we are unfortunately forming governments, we are picking between the lesser of evils. And again, the whole point of dismantling colonialism and taking on an oppression is you will restructure political norms. Now, the only reservation I have is we have to make room for free will, and we also have to acknowledge what happens when people have mistook propaganda for like actual truthful information and philosophies, right? So again, we are in a time where we are building up to a great war. 2025 marks the beginning of that great war, and then it will snowball over the coming years. I'll be honest with you, I do think you are going to see very frightening parties be formed, and initially they might, paint themselves to be palatable. I want to emphasize they will be the most destructive pieces of you have ever seen, and you are basically living through history, right? You are making history. But likewise, destruction and creation are one of the same thing. And again, I have more hope that actually in the face of all this nastiness, this venom, this hate, you will even see everyday people who perhaps before were not engaged in politics or felt like they couldn't make a difference, form parties, unionize with people, show solidarity with different groups. So just as we see these haters form, I think we see the next wave of revolutionaries, game changers, activists, real leaders with real good visions for their country come to light. And you just got to remember, for us, because Vedic astrology is a religious practice, unfortunately, we think people only really tend to remember God and purpose and kind of like, more ethical ways of existing in really dark times. So if this is what it takes, this is what it takes. The next prediction I had was around huge tensions and movements, basically on workers' rights, so labor rights. So think of it like this. Obviously, we are seeing huge progressions when it comes to AI in several different industries. However, I think with that advancement, you're going to see different kinds of employees really fight their own corner, because I think it's ridiculous that you couldn't resolve the normalization of financial exploitation and labor exploitation of people across all sectors, but you could create a fucking machine and a really questionable algorithm to do their job and do it poorly. And I just think we are now reaching that time where social responsibility around technology is going to come to a head. So I would really encourage any of you watching this video, because again, I'm really aware of the current lay of the land. Unemployment is at an all-time high. We see wealth inequalities that, like, honestly are worse than fucking medieval or Victorian times. We are in a time of great despair, corruption, and rottenness. You don't give up hope, nor do you accept the remedies and solutions that come from the people who literally made money from oppressing you. I really want you to get involved with different unions. I really want you to go out your way, however you can, to learn about different exploitations of labor, look at the trends that are happening in your industry and sector, and work with other people to come up with alternatives. We're going to circle back to this at the end of the video, but there is a reason this year might be, I think, more infuriating than you felt before. But that anger you're feeling, Gemini is a sign of creation, intelligence, transformation, and as you heard, with the return of light. Let it inspire you to show that things can be done differently, and let it inspire you to show that things can be done ethically without thus harm. Just because we can do it and it's normalized doesn't mean it's the best path. Okay, hibiscuses? The next one I had was global movements for equality. So again, previously, over the last 100 years, when I was tracking Jupiter going through the Gemini nakshatras, regardless of like where Saturn and Rahu and Ketu was at, you've seen huge movements when it comes to civil rights, right? So again, and probably unfortunately not very shockingly, for marginalized people and working class people, I want you to stay very safe at this time, because for these movements to start, I can only assume some foul shit is going to go down. I don't wish that to be any of you. But what I do wish is for you to not become desensitized to this violence, this normalization of harm, censorship, oppression. It's kind of your moral, social, and karmic duty to fight back. And you can do that in so many different ways. I want you to pay attention how we are seeing fascism being normalized, and how the first thing they wanted to attack was the right to protest. They wanted to redefine what freedom of speech means. They are literally jailing journalists. They're scaring professors and wonderful thinkers and innovators out of our educational institutions. This is a crisis. But like I said, extraordinarily awful times can take ordinary people and make them revolutionaries, can make them activists, can make them game changers. And I also think activism comes in so many different ways. I really believe that. I think activism can come through the arts. I think it can come through sports. Even stuff like farming, sciences, education. It's not always just about picking up a sign. I think it's about ownership. I think it's about visibility. And I don't really believe in representation, just because I think representation sometimes, or more times, is tokenism. And unfortunately, with representation, you often have to pander to the fascist or the oppressor to get that screen time. So that's why I'm very much on, you guys need to gather together, support each other, share each other's work, and you make each other visible. You normalize your voices. You boycott in some regards, right? So again, I think you're going to see these really wonderful movements, but I want you guys to get involved, and you can do that in so many different ways, because you're all talented with different types of talents and skills, so use them. You won't lose them, but it'd be a damn shame. The next one I was going to say, and it's not comfortable, unfortunately, we are going to see huge issues with police brutality. Martial law will be implemented. Governments will be turning their weapons on their people. Now, at the time of recording this, as you guys know, I am Punjabi. I'm the direct descendant of people who were the victims of Hindu fascism. I have lost family members to the genocide. Yeah. But again, very unfortunately, Punjab's story of surviving genocidal maniacs and fascism is not unique. We have the same woes as Bengalis, as Tamilians, as Palestinians, Kashmiris, African Americans. Unfortunately, weirdly enough, there are more oppressed, marginalized people than there are, our bullies. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. And again, we're going to be having more regular chit chats because now I have help. In times of undeniable human rights violations, violence, descent into darkness, you exist for a reason. And I do not think your reason is to hide, cower, be complicit. Many of you are bright. You are curious. You know right from wrong, but there's a lot of fear, and I understand that fear. I really, really do. But respectfully, if you can see me, who literally gets thousands of death threats from Hindu fascists, and you can see what I do with astrology, tell me what you couldn't do with your much more, I think, impressive talents and skills. And the thing is, when you are dealing with genocide, with colonialism, imperialism, fascism, or all the isms that these bitches create, minus the more pleasurable ones, what they cannot stand is defiance. What they cannot stand is you showing actual information, knowledge, stories that contradict their propaganda, their normalization of violence and all of that. And likewise, I really do appreciate no one really wants to vote because we feel like we are picking the lesser of two evils. I get that. And I honestly understand why you would not want to, but that is not the long-term solution, nor do I think it's really good for us in the present day. I think it's incredibly important to become politically engaged. Hopefully there are some of you watching that have wanted to get involved in politics, and I hope this is a validation you need to start mingling with people in your town, letting them know your name, going to council meetings, taking up the space. But likewise, the rest of us, we have to get behind those candidates. We can't, again, I understand the lack of engagement, and nor do I think it's fair to blame voters from not engaging with the systems, right? But we have to create something different. We can't become ideal because, again, in us being disengaged, in us being desensitized, that's how they'll hold on to power and unfortunately can enact a lot of nasty stuff that, again, it's just so violent and evil. So I think, again, get involved. And I want you to think back. I talk a lot about different types of karmas. I talk a lot about ancestral karmas because that has the biggest impact on the experiences and the opportunities that we have in this lifetime or this reincarnation. You're also someone's ancestor. And aren't you glad that some of your ancestors made certain difficult decisions, plucked up the courage and all of that? Things come 360. Now it's your turn. Don't cower. You can't. Again, 2025 is the year when ancestral karmas all get unlocked. We are now in a very long window where we will be resolving and finishing our ancestors' challenges, fulfilling their dreams. I've got to stand up, hibiscuses. Next after that, look, as you can tell, it's a time of a lot of political unrest. I think we're in a time, right, where we are going to see the power and necessity in activism. And the one thing I really want to preach to you all, because I think in the face of fascism and such political venom and violence, when you are by yourself, it is so scary. But the truth is, as we learned, as I was doing my little chit chat, there are more of us than there are them. This is why I really promote multiculturalism. I really promote you to have solidarity with different communities. And again, in the era of social media, your world is much bigger and connected than it's ever been. So you must be careful not to fall to people who are intentionally sent to create division, right? You must not fall to people who have conditions about what liberation, solidarity, and peace and inclusivity looks like. In some ways, I want you to be able to challenge yourself, right? Why do we think this is the only path? Why does our help and our empathy stop at certain points? And I promise you, at those certain points it stops. It's not your heart, nor is your mind. It's a manufactured weapon of the oppressor. Because once you cross that boundary and you link up and you are involved in each other's causes and you don't do that fucking thing of my cause is more important than yours and you guys walk away from that hibiscuses. When you have real fucking solidarity and you have empathy and understanding and patience and you come to the table willing to resolve stuff, then oh, baby, are they in for a tough time? And it is inevitable. These things will happen. But if we are not willing to do that work and challenge ourselves, stagnant process, hibiscuses, you know, and the past is the past, but I think it's important to be intersectional, right? So for instance, I'll go first, right? I care so much about Punjabi liberation. Like, I fucking eat, sleep, live it. But it's also because I have lived in the house with people who are victims of that violence. I'm a victim of that violence, right? I also can acknowledge how in the Punjabi community, there is unfortunately still elements of people who are Islamophobic, who people would be misogynistic, they could be homophobic, transphobic. Like, I can see the clear divides, right? That doesn't mean I perpetuate them, and it also doesn't mean I don't acknowledge how those maybe normalizations of like foul thoughts stop us connecting with people and having that strength. So one, I acknowledge them. Number two, I will validate those people's feelings. But number three, I work on solutions and building those bridges. And sometimes, you know, when you are dealing with people who have been the victim of that hurt and pain, you have to be grown up enough to extend the hand so they feel safe. But you also can't be shitty about how long it takes them to hold your hand back and how comfortable they feel holding it, because they have not been made to feel safe. But if you can just acknowledge how to speak to that safety, cultivate that safety, and sustain that safety, then I'm telling you, we are in a bad boy era, and it's coming, it's inevitable. That's why my predictions are 10-10. Like, listen, all of you, if you've been following me for a long time, I told you I grew up around Starbucks spirituality. Colonizer free stemmed from internal before it became external with Westerners. I grew up around the Hindu fascists. This is a reminder, the Vedas, which is the most important scripture that a lot of Hindus follows, were created in Punjab, the same land that they genocide, the same people they chop up, they fucking violate. Tantra was perfected in Bangladesh. The same shit they do to Punjabis, they do to them. Most of the most riveting, delicious pujas, rituals, they come from that rich Peruvian culture of the South. Those three victims of Hindu fascism also created, curated, sustained, preserved the same religion they claim to follow. That's why when you see these Hindu fascists doing astrology predictions, they're the ones who will say, welcome Canada to the 51st state of America. They will openly talk about how the Palestinians deserve to be unalived. They're no longer following the religion. It's fascism they follow. They're just using the guise of religion to justify their venom and hate. But you see me existing. You see me talking to things. You see me extending the hand. Jupiter and Gemini, it is that light return of knowledge. And they're so lost in the source, they're not going to come back. Like, what's written for them, they'll deserve it. And I'm going to do a video about it. I'll cover it one time so you know what's up. But hibiscuses, the magique you see of me, the reason you listen to me, the reason this is happening for whatever reason it is multiculturalism, is extending the hand, is understanding your woes, and not doing oppression Olympics. Now let's look at my next set of predictions, which heavily focus on protecting the youth. So as you can see to the left of me, this is not a comfortable conversation. The youth are very, very vulnerable. But I want to break down why the youth are so important to this time, and especially moving forward. So look, when I think of Jupiter, I do think more of ethics, knowledge, and it's the normalisation. Why do we do what we do? Why do we preserve the things that we do? How do we know what is right and what is wrong, you know? And then when you look at Gemini, that's youth. Think of Migasira. That's like your teenage years, right? That spark of curiosity. Why do I have to eat these vegetables? Why are things the way they are? All of a sudden, you want to explore outside of the boundaries that your family, your society, your community, your culture has given you. Then we enter Adra, right? Adra is your very messy 20s, right? You now have that money behind you. You now have that freedom behind you. So those curiosities you can act on. Some of them really pay off. Some of them you learn why it's not a good thing. But but you go through the thick of emotions of acting on those impulses and curiosities. And then finally, and thank God, we have one of us all, right? The return of light. If you like, it really is that calm post-storm. You know, Punavasu is, if you like, I would liken it to your late 30s, early 40s, where you have acted out those curiosities and you have arrived at clear insights as to why it is good and it is not good. But you will only know after going through those experiences. It's very rare any of us learn via guidance. Unfortunately, we are very stubborn, right? And we only tend to believe what we believe once we've experienced it. Now, the issue is, in a time of fascism, oppression, and building up to really volatile times ahead, but it will spark liberation. So stay calm, hibiscuses. It's not all thunder and tears. The youth are really important to that movement. I want you to think about, firstly, how when we have seen fascism over many different decades in different communities, how the first thing they attack is education. And who by default has the most intense and consistent experiences with education and knowledge? The babies, the youth, right? They do. So when we live in a time where we can see they are eradicating history, they are rewriting history to again promote really weird fascist understandings of the world, we can see they are intentionally disarming the youth from critically thinking, from seeing different perspectives that go against fascist norms. They are the most vulnerable group. And I don't think it's fair to say children are the most easily influenced because, again, if you look around the current world, I think we could liken some of people who are clearly adults to children because look how easy they have fallen to propaganda. So again, I think we're at this time, well, you know, one of my predictions is that the game changers are now going to be activated on their paths. And a huge part of their responsibility is sharing their knowledge. And again, they can do this in different industries and sectors. But I think one way that we can all really help to ensure the youth do have exposure to different opinions whilst they have access is to create and share that knowledge. And again, in the age of social media, whether that's resharing a post, whether that's you picking up a mic and doing some education, it's the least that we can do. And I think more in our personal lives. I was thinking about in England, there was a Netflix show, called Adolescence that came out. And it really was talking to the epidemic of gender-based violence that we're seeing, particularly in young boys. And I saw brilliant TikToks of moms sitting down their children or sharing their experiences where, yeah, they had their young sons all of a sudden saying like off the cuff comments where they knew like, motherfucker, you know? And instead of avoiding it or being like, you know, boys will be boys or it's a phase, they sat the child down and they didn't chastise the child. They're like, oh, that's cool. So why do you think that? Who said that? Why do you think they said that? And it, do you know what it is? I always say one of the things about colonialism, it makes you feel scared of conflict and difficult conversations. You now have like really brilliant psychologists and therapists who again are from marginalized backgrounds talking about like love and light or this need to always keep the peace is actually really bad. And the more we fear conflict, we actually exacerbate generational issues with depression, anxiety, and all of that. So the point that I'm getting at is in your personal lives, and you can do this in a loving way, you ain't got to go in guns a-blazing, have the conversation. Don't ignore it. Don't mistake it for a phase. That is your baby, your sibling, I don't know, maybe your parent, your loved one, whatever. Have the conversation, because the issue is when we get to fester by ourselves or we are put into a manufactured mental prison, that's where a lot of harm comes. And the more we allow time to pass, the rot gets deeper and it's harder to clean out, right? So we've got to go with that lens. And then I think alongside that, when I was looking at the idea of protecting the youth, the other thing that came to mind was, well, respect the youth, hear their voices. I cannot emphasize this enough. I have no problem with age. Like, I like being in my 30s. I don't mind if someone calls me an auntie. Like, I'm living, I've lived, like, I'm proud of it, right? But I have never fallen into the trap that I think my experiences or my knowledge would trump that of somebody who maybe has a little less years on them. Because I'm always amazed by the youth. Like, they pick up on stuff that I feel like I wasn't really comfortable talking about or concerned about well into like my 20s, right? And I just think that self-awareness and that pattern recognition, you have to give them space to express themselves. And most importantly, you've got to take on what they're expressing, and you've got to protect their rights to express themselves. Because again, go back to fascism. So I'll use the example of Hindu fascists, but you can see the same in Nazis. You can see it wherever you exist. The flavor of fascism that comes in, you'll see the same. So India, the colonial project, is currently ruled by BJP. BJP is a fascist party whose ideological parent is RSS. Just so you understand who they are, RSS was in cahoots with the Nazis. The Nazis then took Hindu symbology, which was validated by these Hindu fascists, to perpetuate Nazism. Go back to like one of my earlier videos. I talk about the overlaps between spirituality and fascism because I was pre-warning you about what was going to come gently. And one of their biggest things is they would set up schools as like community centers or places for young youth who usually were disenfranchised to hang out and to connect. And they would be grooming them with fascist propaganda. And then after kind of grooming them, that's when they started introducing them to concepts of violence. These people are your enemies, A, B, and C. And the reason the fascists will always concentrate on the youth the most is not because they're the easiest to manipulate. It's longevity in their political power, because we are, well, we're all dying, but we're a little bit closer to it than them. That is their workforce. That is their voters. So whoever can really engage the youth, bada boom, bada bing. Even think of it now, right? I think in India, nearly 75% of the population is under the ages about 35, 36, right? Initially, as the current fascist regime was coming into power, they were really appealing to the youth about their rights, more worldliness, this pride in Indian identity. And now, after a few election frauds and all of that, the youth are the ones who suffer the most. Unemployment is an all-time high. India is the poorest it's ever been. India is now poorer than it would have been under like the British occupiers, right? For £1, I can get over 115 rupees. And it's only going to go up because fascism is not economically viable. The youth are now the most imprisoned and the most censored. So that's what I'm saying. It is better to intervene. It's better to engage. It's better to meet them where they are, but likewise, show them the respect, the care, and also help them give the tools and resources to create what they want to see and make them feel like they are part of society. Then you can, I think, really tackle a lot of ugly stuff. And then you are also empowering movements of the future. So again, hibiscuses. When we go through transits, it's not always about what's happening to us. We've got to pay attention to everybody else. I was listening to this really wonderful podcast. It's by a Caribbean dude. Oh, what is it? I think it's called like No NDA or something like that. He's so brilliant, right? And he said something to the line, well, it takes a child to raise a village and everybody wants to be a part of a village, but no one wants to be a villager. And ever since I heard that, like, he's one of those babes that drops the gems regularly, I was like, well, I think that's what Jupiter and Gemini is speaking to. This idea that you want community, you're worried about community being eradicated, but why is no one stepping up and being the villager? So that's my thing to you, hibiscuses. When we're looking at this set of predictions, and as you can see to the side, they're not comfortable, nor are they easy. We have a social responsibility to make sure the babies are set, and everyone's babies can't just be about your babies, because if you're only focusing on your youth, then we have an issue. Like I said, multiculturalism, solidarity, inclusion. And even if you don't know it, even if you haven't experienced it, we've got to figure it out. And maybe it'll take some experimenting, maybe it'll take some boo-boos and fuck-ups, but it's better to try and create than to normalize whatever this bullshit is that we're currently suffering under. All right. And the other thought I had, and this is more going to be Saturn in Pisces, because woo, since Saturn entered Pisces, I have felt like a whole new baby. This is a time when naturally you actually might want to connect to things of your youth, right? I've been watching loads of Made in Chelsea, re-listening to old albums. I've been shopping at the stores I used to shop at when I was younger. Promise you, it's not a crisis in my 30s. But for me, it's been this feeling of like, when did life get in the way that I stopped caring about these things? And these things are still important to me now. So how do I rebuild that connection? And I just think it's interesting in the era of fascism, colonialism, and oppression, how many people are like more spicier about reconnecting to the things that brought them happiness instead of like, I think basically deep throating this propaganda they keep trying to shove in our throats. I also used to tell loads of dirty jokes when I was younger. Voila. Now let's talk about the next set of predictions. Oh, to be fair, the next two slides are just random predictions I had. So we'll walk and talk through this together. So the first one is media outlets are going to be shut down. So I see this playing out in two ways. So unfortunately, in the era of fascism, censorship is about to become really quite brutal. So that's again why I am promoting you guys sharing knowledge, sharing your experiences. And again, getting behind people who do real journalism instead of falling prey to like these propaganda fucking spiritual scabs of humans. Number two, and I don't know if this is good or bad, but I think you're going to see certain publications shut down. So traditionally, we've seen magazines, certain tabloids shut down. But then again, in the era of social media, I'm wondering if it would be certain pages, might be platforms, but TBC. I'm not sure if Tumblr went down during this one, or was it, what was the other one? The really short one before TikTok, but essentially, oh, this is another thing. I actually wanted to create a astrology video, basically walking through why it's really important that in these astrological times, we become historians, we embrace like physical media copies, and when we start archiving and storing stuff way beyond just a cloud or digital footprint, I think that's become really important. And again, I just think if you look at cultural erasure, historical erasure, the remixing that fascism and oppressors are trying to do, I think it's very important that we preserve our own histories, tell our own stories, document everything, because I do think it's going to become quite handy in the coming years. And then following that, I put serious threat to journalists' lives and safety. We're going to get to this at the end of the video, but this is a time when knowledge is really being, or information, should I say, is really being weaponized. The bare minimum we can do is get behind and support the people who are brave enough to tell the truth and question this propaganda. It's the right thing to do, hibiscuses, and also it's our safety. You know, in the era where it's becoming harder to tell the difference between a truth and a lie, the people who are, again, incredibly brave enough to tell those stories and show you how they got their information and have that integrity, got to do right by them. Because otherwise we normalize the sloppiness. So I don't know if you guys were unfortunate enough to see Piers Morgan take on like 3 buffoons from India. But a part of me was really proud because before basically everything that kicked off, and this is why I'm like, oh, creation and destruction are one of the same things. I really felt no one really knew that India was a colonial project and how regularly India genocides people, harms people. Like, there's so much violence in the country. And I always used to get really upset that people couldn't tell the difference between like Punjabis, Bengalis, Tamilians, Nepalis, Kashmiris. Like, they kept saying we're Indian, but like, we're not Indian. We're the victims of India. And then unfortunately, there's people in our own communities who have been brainwashed. But then I was thinking, now they can see all the shit I talk about. Now, like, I want you to pay attention how much you understand when I say Starbucks spirituality, what I mean, and when I say colonizer-free astrology, what I mean, right? Because again, in real time, you were seeing the propaganda that's so normalized in India, and it was global. And I was like, this is delicious, because when you talk about liberation and you talk about solidarity, it needs that global exposure. So now you are seeing the same propaganda machines that are normalized in India to uphold the regime. And they could not take the world pouncing on them, being like, the truth, you know her? Like, it was sensational to me. So again, like, you got to get behind the right people. And also it's really scary to tell the truth. So again, back them, right? Because one day you might need someone's support. So, oh, I just had a song, Shola, coming to my head. You might need somebody, but you might need somebody for real. The next one, well, grave issues with terrorism. This is what I want to emphasize. I want you to pay attention to who they label as terrorists, because respectfully, as someone who comes from freedom fighters, one person's freedom fighter is always going to be the oppressor's terrorist. And my theory is, as I've written here, is they will manufacture this idea of terrorism to pass really questionable laws that deepen fascism and authoritarian regimes. hibiscuses, do you truly understand the era we're in? And like, again, I don't know if I need to start sharing biographies, films, music with you. Like, I naturally am a geek and I've always enjoyed like studying religions, activists, and history. But y'all, pick up a book, watch a documentary, be inspired by the game changers before us, because guess who we are? We got to get to work. And they face the same crap, maybe with less technology, but I think equally as scary. We got to pan up, because otherwise, if we normalize believing their propaganda, not challenging how they're painting people, not learning about media literacy and pushing back, we will enter really scary, regressive times. And I just think we're still in a position where we can fight it. So we gotta kind of get like, I don't know, like human rights Mike Tyson-y about it. Like they should fear us, you know, they should feel like their ears are not safe around us. And alongside this is why I also keep teaching you about like cybersecurity, and I want to do more like thoughtful pieces about it. Pattern up when it comes to your digital footprint. They are going to do whatever they can do to imprison people, or again, like suppress movements and stop liberation. Get smarter, get safer, make it happen. Also, can I point out, I really think this would be a good time to stop following influencers who don't acknowledge the craziness that's happening, or who some way are complicit or like enabling or flattering all this corruption. Like I think naturally a lot of you are going to fall out of love with them and start like actually bullying them, which I know I shouldn't say I love to see it, but I do. But everything we consume feeds into the success of these people. So I think boycotting, where we direct our energy, who we give our support to, who we give our energy attention, who do we trust for information. Oh my God, even the clothing we used to cover our ass, it all comes together. So we got to do right by people. The next one, on a happier note, oh my God, the most iconic art, I honestly, when I was going through the archives and looking at the transits, the best art has always been produced when Jupiter goes through the Gemini nakshatras and Saturn goes through the Pisces nakshatras. So again, Viva la Revolution, but also the art, the sitcoms, the film, the music it creates. One thing I was thinking of, and this is more linked to Bad Bunny, because he released his album when Saturn was going through Pisces, how healing his album was, and how he intentionally made sure it was in English, and also how he did a big fuck you by not touring in America, because also it would have put Latino people in grave harm, because they would have sent ICE agents. That's what I'm talking about. It's just great. It's a great time. So again, if you're watching this, and I always tell you guys, I think you guys are so wildly talented, skilled, and amazing. Put that shit out there. Put that shit out there, especially as a marginalized people. Put that shit out there. We are fighting the Mindy Kalins, the Priyanka Chopras, those nasty representations of us. And how do we fight it? We got to take more representation than them. We literally have to show off our voices. So when people hear them, they're like, huh. Can I tell you something? Again, in the downfall of colonialism and all of the scandal, one thing I lived for is that I pre-warned people that Bollywood was going to start being like really poorly received and it's going to crumble. How you'll learn how Bollywood was complicit in the fascism and oppression and genociding of my people. But likewise, you saw one of our babes there. You saw Dashid Jassange there. That was my guy doing dandyism in the Punjabi form. You know that all-white outfit with the turban, the actual jewels from Punjab? I was like, oh, this... So meanwhile, whilst like Hindu fascist Bollywood was getting their assholes ripped, everyone was like, who is this charming young prince? This is sir. And he had like Punjabi on the back of his Sharani, which is so important because basically the Hindu fascists are trying to like eradicate our languages. And like it was honestly, it like really, really made me smile. Like it truly, like I cry every time I watch the video. But that's what I'm saying. Like as marginalized people, document your shit, embrace your cultural roots. Like I do a pep talk about this like every other day on TikTok, and I don't care if it's repetitive, just because I'm like, I hope this gets and makes it way to as many marginalized people as possible. Embrace and explore and express your identity and your cultural roots. And I'm not saying you have to go like full 100%, but like you live in different countries. That culture has evolved, capture it. Because in the era of fascism and its biggest tool, homogeneity, you being distinct and different is a massive psychological fuck you to it. Sweet Mother of Mary and his side chick too. I keep having really bad coughing fits. But then again, I suppose, look at me sharing all this truth, clarity and knowledge with you. obviously the haters would want me to choke. So whilst it may look sexy to watch me choke, it doesn't feel it. But anyway, back to my predictions. So the next one I had was basically either with or without government consent. Oh, documents or basically exposing stuff is going to come out, showing what they've really been up to. So I have a few observations here. Number one, remember what I said about you all being truth tellers. So if you happen to be a whistleblower watching this, speak your shit, baby. We are behind you. We will document you. We will rally for you. Okay. But the other thing I was thinking is, I think this is actually very important because again, in the era of fighting against fascism and oppression, I really do think we are fighting against a lot of ignorance. I think manufactured like stupidity and misunderstandings of people. And I think when knowledge of that comes out, that like you are aware that your government intentionally creates war, intentionally creates these tensions, these conflicts, manufactures the actual poverty and the insecurities that harm you. I think that's a good path to liberation, don't you, hibiscuses? So again, stay locked in. And then, the next one I had was many countries will look at expanding their energy resources. Conflict over land to expand or collaborating with foreign lands to achieve this comes to the forefront. Essentially, we're at this place now where, think about what I was saying with biotechnology. Instead of addressing what caused that destruction, they actually are going to think it's a great idea to buddy up with their other crap mates to do more extraction. And I also, do you know what? I really, really want people to keep this at the forefront of their mind. A lot of the war that you're going to see manufactured or try to seduce people is nothing actually to do with people's safety, rights, justice, or, you know, like the ethics of society. It's literally about money grabbing. It's all about money grabbing. A lot of the fascist countries are economically destroyed now, and they don't know how to make money without destroying land or creating war. Like, this is what I try and tell you guys all the time. When someone tells you something, or you find that there are certain news headlines or political narratives that are very repetitive and coming to the forefront, just do a really simple exercise of, why are they telling me this now? What else is happening in the world, or what would they like to happen in the world that might make them feel like they have more power, they can stay in power longer? Again, pay attention to when immigrants are demonized. Pay attention to what's happening around the time they're always demonized, because the truth is, if any economy wishes to thrive, it will need an economy that is multicultural and it actually does have workers from different countries. That's how globalization works. That's how you have strong, fair, and equal trading agreements. You need that connection and solidarity. And also pay attention to them demonizing immigrants also might be the path to you becoming enslaved. Because this is it, right? The reality is, if the fascists are successful with getting rid of immigrants, you then will be the people who will have to accept really poor working qualities and all of that. But also, I want you to push back as to why, like, there's so much, like, why would we even normalize that immigrants should be only in the country to be exploited and basically abused for labor? Like, there's so many layers to it, but basically, wake up, hibiscuses, because all of this is weaponization to make you be complicit or become a victim of something else. Next, public figures are arrested and sent to jail. Diddy, your time is so if you didn't know, I love pop culture and celebrity gossip, even though as time goes on, I just find it increasingly alarming that we've normalized like what I can only describe as like human trafficking. Like, it's all really weird. Yeah. All of them, jail. Traditionally, when Jupiter's gone through Gemini nakshatras, really big figures have been imprisoned. Pay attention to who you're idolizing, because when they go to jail, you probably are part of the reason that they were able to be active in broad daylight. That could also actually signal politicians going to jail, but TBC. Then we have public figures getting kidnapped, unalived, or seriously stalked. Well, hibiscuses, I'm going to be honest with you. We are actually in the downfall of celebrity culture. And also, just think of it, when there are such deep wealth inequalities, when we have normalized really harmful ideologies and beliefs and all of that, what else did you expect? And the thing is, it's going to be quite frequent. So, do you know what I was thinking? I think these social media influencers are not going to be safe. I'll leave it at that. And now let's look at my second slide. So, what did I have? So yeah, you're going to have a higher likelihood of typhoons, tornadoes, and hurricanes. So yeah, basically in Gemini, you get a lot of like windstorm related environmental energy. So like in Punjab, we call it Niri, right? We had really severe storms that kind of damaged a lot of people's crops. So it's very much like that. Unfortunately, we do see a lot of deaths related to people who work with natural resources, so gas, oil, energy. You're basically looking at ecological disasters. But again, I also think this will be a good trigger to start applying more pressure and delivering serious results for the normalization of just basically like fracking, exploiting land. And again, the workers who deliver those energies and sources. Prisoners escaping prison. So we'll save this for Saturn going through Pisces, but prisons is a huge theme over the next 2.5 years. Oh, serial killers or disturbing murder cases are discovered at this time. So far, we only have Diddy as disturbing, but I'm sure more are going to come out. Republics are formed at this time, motherfucker. I'm talking independence. So the thing is, this is actually going to take years to play out, but the stuff that happens within like this year, conjunct with all the other crazy transits, it opens the doorway for countries that have been oppressed or lost land to reclaim it. It's going to be a longer journey, but I just want you to have hope and faith because we in there, hibiscuses. Stay safe when it comes to healthcare. So there's serious threats of basically influenza, so the flu, or some sort of epidemics have high potential to become pandemics during this time. And then, yeah, fascist figures can enter permanent positions. I told you, you are meant to be a historical figure. You existing in historical times. Make history. Document how you fought it. Try your best. Let's handle all of this. Now that I probably have given you so many questions, anxieties, hopefully hope about what would unravel, let me break down understanding the Gemini nakshatras a little bit deeper, because this is also tied to a lot of ancestral karma being unlocked. And then after that, you will like, comment, share, and subscribe. I always want to say that. But yeah, on to the next part. So hopefully it's clear that as we go through this transit, it is really our knowledge and access to information that makes or breaks what we experience during this transit. Because likewise, we can easily see how knowledge and information can lead to liberation, how it can lead to people feeling empowered, how it can create alternatives. It can create a lot of good. But likewise, on the other side of that conversation, we can see how the weaponization of knowledge and information can lead to poverty, can lead to people's insecurities being weaponized against them. And essentially, we are looking at a very dark descent into people becoming prisoners of god-awful ideologies and worse societies, and I think really disturbing norms. So the pendulum swings both ways, hibiscuses. And one thing I was thinking about, you know, I've been reading for people for over 16 years of my life now, right? So when I look at the nakshatras, I think of people, I think of real life experiences that I've been fortunate enough to capture. And the one thing that always really stood to me was the ancestral connection in Gemini nakshatras. Because when you study colonialism, one of its first tactics is it will always try to break, sever, and completely destroy its victims from ancestral knowledge. And I'm talking about like how you look after land, religion, medicine, science, all of that. So like one thing I always find really interesting, how in the modern day, people who are the descendants of a lot of colonial empires will try to repackage knowledge that was stolen and all of that and show its innovation, discoveries, when it's like, no, there's communities who've known that for thousands and hundreds of years, but you took it away from them. So with that, I want to explore the Gemini nakshatras with you in detail about what they represent in terms of intellect, how it connects to our ancestors, and how we can use that time wisely. Because I also think in this transit, you are going to create fabulous work. And you may not see it now, but the knowledge you cultivate and the education, information, knowledge you share, it's so life-changing. It also is globally shifting. So let's go, hibiscuses. So let's begin by looking at Mrigasira, that Gemini type 1 to 2. Mrigasira is often symbolized by a deer's head. So if you like, imagine gallivanting through knowledge, seeking truth. And what Mrigasira energy initially feels like is the following. How come I didn't know that? Why can't I find this? Why is this accepted? It's those really important moments of doubt, curiosity, and, questioning that can lead us to some life-altering truths. So when you think about ancestral connection, what I think it will physically look like is a lot of people wanting to connect with their cultural roots and learn about them. That can be through food, medicine, arts, religion, clothing. Like, the world is your oyster. You're all very different, right? But there is a divine reason you will be called to go and explore the areas that you are so interested in. And what I want you to do is make time for it. Because this is the thing, people often think that they're not smart or the knowledge they have couldn't make impact, right? And unfortunately, that's what really stops a lot of marginalized people from having ownership and authorities in certain interesting sectors. But meanwhile, the mediocre, oppressive pricks, they think they're geniuses. So I kind of need you to get with the program, hibiscuses. There's bigger things we've got going on, right? I promise you, and again, even look at me. Did you think as a child, I thought my natural curiosity in astrology and since I'm literally talking from the ages of 3 or 4, I've always enjoyed studying religion. I've always just been immersed in it, and it's been a private affair for many years. Do you think I knew at the time, as a child, then a teenager, and then as a young adult, the knowledge I was cultivating through my curiosity, through my experimentation, through my life experiences would lead to what it has now? And do you think I had any idea my ability to read the stars or whatever this awooga trait is of mine could help people when it came to liberation, to fighting oppression and all of that? No. But thank God I followed my curiosities. Thank God I continue to learn and explore, because it has its purpose. So whilst you may not see it in the moment, I promise you, in the long run, you're going to be a little bit more powerful than you give yourself credit for, or the work you're cultivating is going to be a little bit more impactful than you're currently seeing. Okay, hibiscuses? But likewise, maybe let's look at the other side of things. So obviously in the Gemini nakshatras, we believe in free will, right? Vedic astrology is a religious practice. You can also see people become hell-bent on validating their truth that they would ignore reality. So for instance, let's go back to Hindu fascism. The rest of the world is currently wanting to take India into human rights courts because it's being shown really clearly how they have lied about Pakistan attacking Kashmir, how certain things are there's a lot of truth missing and there's a lot of manipulation. Now, on the other side of people who are victims of Hindu fascism and all the crap and they're being manipulated by it, they are taking in wildly inaccurate journalism. They are eating up false propaganda narrative and they're mistaking it for truth. And what they're not seeing, and they'll feel this in the long run, their indulgence of wanting to prove these really nasty perceptions to be correct, right, and empowering is the same things that are going to lead them to be isolated, rejected, and humiliated on a global stage. I think about this so deeply. So even in India now, the economy is broken. It's undoubtedly broken, right? He has drained that economy. You will have the finance minister sitting on they call it Godly media, so essentially propaganda news, saying the rupee's never been stronger, it's only weak against the US dollar, when that's incorrect. The rupee is now the lowest currency in the whole of Asia. It doesn't rank very high in global currency. It's very much on its way to being devalued completely. And I want to emphasize, whether you buy in Canadian, Australian dollars, whether you buy in the pound, it's at an all-time high, and it's been like that for several months. But with their chest, they'll say everything's all right. But now I want you to think about fascism. If they're doing that about finance and things that are really vital, when you look at darker aspects, could you see how someone's going to be manipulated, or again, just only go towards, so we call it confirmation bias, right? We only want to go towards stuff that confirms the things that we think and feel. So I also think hibiscuses, like I've said throughout this video, we've got to be open to different experiences and different perspectives, because they will only enrich you. Again, I always want you to know, the only reason, well, not the only reason, I think in the era of fascism, and where a lot of my peers who are Vedic astrologers who've been rotted by fascism are going to fall, is because of that confirmation bias. Because whilst they were out here so fixated, they weren't even consuming religious scriptures anymore. What they consume is propaganda in the form of religion, right? Meanwhile, little old me, I studied the Quran. I studied the Quran Sahib. Everyone I read for is a completely different religion, a different nationality, a different ethnicity, a different sexuality, a different age, gender, able-bodied, not like all of that diversity, that exposure, even my life experiences. I'm a multicultural babe, for fuck's sake. You are literally watching a Punjabi babe who stems from England, travels for a fucking living. Like, I'm a third culture kid through and through. That's what makes my understanding, I think, as detailed and as wide as it is. Because I guaranteed you, if I had been sucked into the fucking demon ignorance that they're all being molested by, bro, I'd be so shit, and I'd honestly would feel so embarrassed. But thank God that there's power in diversity of thought. There's power in multicultural. You will never ever suffer or be without by embracing these things. That suffering, that poverty, a lot of that conflict that comes is with ignorance and like you sidelining yourself up from having those experiences. And also, can I be honest, again, like Vedic astrology is a religious practice. I have loads of religious experiences. I just don't share them online because I'm not comfortable. But one of the things I always thought was, because again, when we read for people, I appreciate for a lot of people when they come for readings with me, it's the first time that they feel seen and they don't feel guilty about their idea. Because like when I tell you I see everything, fucker. Like, you can't hide. Like, I see the reality of you, you know? I see your truth. Oh, I forgot where I was going with that hibiscuses. Basically, what I think I was trying to say is, for me, when I read, I'm only reading what God has written. It's not me. I mean, we can speak stuff over your life, but I'm always really careful with it. But it's just this idea of like, you were meant to be like this. I'm only written what God is willing and what will be for you, right? That's it. There's no higher power. I literally could hit my head tomorrow and lose it if God thinks I'm misusing it or whatever, right? But I've always thought, like, of course you're all made differently because God is multifaceted. So like, to reject diversity and that multifacetedness, I think is also to reject God. And I just don't want to go down that slippery slope. But for all intents and purposes, I do think I'm a sexy consequence of multiculturalism and embracing the diversity of things. Meanwhile, my peers, who again have been poisoned by fascism, look like lunatics and are really poorly dressed and aging really badly. That's another thing. I don't know if this is like correct to say, but I definitely been flirting with the idea, because when I was younger, I basically didn't want to be a Vedic astrologer because I literally be like, they all look crusty and rotted. And recently I've been blessed enough to come across like other like spiritual practitioners from like different like cultures and religions and countries, where they were saying, well, no, the more youthful you look is a sign of spirituality. And I'm like, is that why I'm out here aging like fine wine? And meanwhile, the bitch who's 2 or 3 years older than me looks, you know, she looks like she could be a part of like a historical painting. I love to see it. But yeah, what I'm trying to say is embrace multifacetedness and different thoughts, because it will only lead you to good looks, good reality, happiness. With that, let's move on to Ardra. So when you look at Ardra, right, Ardra is one of those signs that scares everybody, but there's no need to be scared, because all Ardra is teaching you is 2 extremes. So number 1, when you're unable to control your mind and your impulses, you will naturally become someone who is self-destructive. And the worst thing is, when we are fully self-destructive and we have no self-realization, we have no self-awareness, we have no self-accountability, we will create our own hell on earth. So when you're looking at like knowledge through the lens of Ardra, 3 things. Number 1, I think it's a nice check-in to work out what knowledge is actually destroying us and is false and is not good, and it gives us a chance and, you know, the space to move away from it. So whilst that can be uncomfortable and frustrating and then perhaps saddening and disappointing, it's merciful, right? But number 2, it's also showing you, like in real time, how things are not benefiting you. But likewise, I think when you look at this spectrum of free will, I think you're gonna, I don't know how to say this. We are at a time where a lot of sacredness is very prone to being destroyed due to people's own hate. That's why I keep telling you, don't underestimate who you are and what you bring to the table, because creation and destruction are one and the same thing. Perhaps your curiosity or your refinement in these areas and whatever that connection is with that information and knowledge is God preserving it or removing the poison. So whilst these people will become the examples or consequences of the misuse, like essentially the negative ramifications, you will be the saving grace. But you gotta go through the motions. You don't get one without the other. The other thing is, as I mentioned, that is a sign of innovation and transformation. Again, you see what I'm doing with Vedic astrology in this bitch, right? You see how my predictions are different to the crazy cuckoos who are telling you I'm with Israel, Canada's going to be a beautiful part of America, all this weird shit. Me and them are looking at the same transits. And isn't it interesting how we're coming out with different fucking outcomes? Isn't it interesting how one of us goes bag for bag with predictions and the other one is writing apologetic tweets and having to fight with people justifying their fascism? There's a reason. And then likewise, talking about destruction, two things. I think, again, you're going to get connected to knowledge or truths that have been lost. But likewise, you might be able to eradicate a lot of ignorance, misunderstanding around certain topics and themes. And again, create wonderful products, service, offerings, leaderships, governments, like give to movements that rejuvenate, heal, like reinvigorate. Which then leads me to Purnavasu, the return of light, our final Gemini nakshatra. So in Purnavasu, the thing I think you see so clearly is the path that separates people who are liberators and then people who are tyrants, because it's ruled by Jupiter, right? And again, we believe in free will. So when Jupiter is well balanced and the soul knows how to use Purnavasu's energy, it will restore integrity. It will restore dignity, righteousness. And again, it's a truth seeker. So when someone is really about it and is going to deliver that change, what they are not attached to is being correct. They're just attached to this idea of delivering truth. And whatever that truth is, I do right by it and I give it a chance to be heard and easily accessible to everybody else, right? And again, I think in the era of censorship, ignorance, and a lot of manufactured hate, violence, and conflict, the ability to tell your stories, cultivate that knowledge, not allow it to be tampered, tainted, threatened by these oppressors, is just like so powerful, right? But the thing is, I think you need courage, I think you need grounding in purpose, because otherwise what happens is, and this is what leads me to Tyrant, someone can see the power of knowledge but not have purpose, so then they weaponize knowledge and information to just perpetuate whatever kind of evils they want. And then it turns into Brahmin Hinduism, Brahmanical, right? So again, I emphasize this a lot. Hinduism by default is not fascist. What we have, unfortunately, is an epidemic of losers who have worked out how to exploit the religion to uphold and achieve their nasty ways because they don't feel good in themselves. I think they are so far removed from God, but they know how to restructure, remix, and taint the religion to justify what they do. And sometimes that looks like you don't know what I know, or only I can have access to this information. So again, with Vedic astrology, it is a religious exercise, right? The knowledge is sacred and it's passed down in a certain way. But that's not to say you are incapable of understanding it. That's also not to say you don't deserve to understand why people come to conclusions that they do. And it's not to say that at some point in your life, you won't have that knowledge. There's such a difference between safeguarding knowledge and empowering people versus weaponizing it and making feel like they're stupid, they can't understand, give it to, like, oh my God, what's that? There's a hip hop lyric that goes, you dumb hoe, you put your, you stupid bitch, you put your trust and your faith in a man, Basically, the information and knowledge version of that. So in Purnavasu, right, going back to ancestral knowledge, it's this idea of reclaiming information, knowledge, giving truths that fuel movements, that allow people to see hope, optimism, and also understand how much they're being lied to and poisoned, right? There's power in words. That's why I always say to anyone, if you ever want a Vedic remedy, just start doing daily prayers. The person who can pray every day is the safest and most prosperous person. The person who only speaks to God when they need something, or the person only remembers God in hard times, of course you suffer more. There's power in words, so use them, right? But likewise, this is going to be a time where I think there's clear winners and losers. And I just think if you follow your curiosities, you acknowledge the truth for what it is, you go through the emotions, but likewise, you take that wisdom, you create stuff that's tangible, you integrate into the day-to-day, my fucking God, like the spectacular shit you can create. But likewise, if you keep choosing to indulge in ignorance, you keep chasing the only truths that validate the things that you want to hear, baby, there's only going to be one consequence. I don't think I have to spell it out for you, but you will manufacture your own suffering. And the thing for us is energy is limited. And after a certain point, it runs out. And once it runs out, you're stuck and you can never come back. And likewise, we believe you have free will. You have the most autonomy to do what you want to do. But we also believe there are ramifications for your choices and you will never be able to avoid them. So imagine you spent years, even when God showed in so many different ways, maybe this is incorrect, maybe this is not the totality of something, but you just kept choosing to indulge in that ignorance. Can you truly be mad when you are put into poverty, when you are isolated, when you are heavily rejected? Because isn't that the thing that you want to cling on to? I'm just saying, God is a comedian. And I just think when we look at Jupiter moving through the Gemini nakshatras, you're going to see people create brilliant work, share life-altering knowledge, collect information and knowledge that honestly will be so historical and game-changing and all this great stuff. But likewise, in the same breath, I'm aware of how in this time, instead of dealing with the reality of things, people will like triple down into that darkness and ignorance, and they will lose touch with reality, and that's what cements their suffering. And the worst thing is, their suffering is not just within their lifetime. Your ignorance has now tainted everything that your future descendants are going to inherit. The other thing I want to point out, and I might say this for the video on like India and Israel, because they actually share a lot of the same astrological placements, which, how interesting. The people who unfortunately are related to these fascists, and you know well that these people are not right, in some ways you're their karma. And it's not because your lives are going to be entirely fucked. That's not what I'm getting at either. Well, there will be glimmers of it. I'll be real with you also. The gag is that even for all their bloodlust, their romanticization of fascism, their children's turned their back on it. You're going to see more children of Israel and India disdain their version of religion and their versions of reality and truth. And I think in some ways that is the most poetic justice. You did this all in the name of your children and preservation, but your very hate is a thing that destroys your community. And your hate is the very reason your children now kind of feel rootless, because they don't want it, because they can see the rot in their roots and they want to pick differently. But then also it's beautiful because then they can start healing and going towards truths and having solidarity and clarity that other generations couldn't have, and they can make a difference. But yeah, that's what I think I had to say. Other than that, you know the routine. I'm out of this bitch. Bye. See you in the next video. Bye, Hibiscuses.